Hello, welcome back to my recommended books. This episode I'm going to be talking about metalworking. I covered blacksmithing in a previous episode, and today I'm going to talk about every other aspect of metalworking. I've got two books I'm going to recommend, and they're two books from very different books, but they're both very useful, and they're both books that I refer back to frequently. The first one I've mentioned before in my I think in the welding basics video, and as always I'll put details of the books in the description. So this is Farm and Workshop Welding by Andrew Pearce, and this is an excellent welding manual and fabrication. So if you've got to stick things together, this book goes through MIG welding, TIG welding, I think we've got gas welding in here as well. Obviously it's got arc welding, we've got brazing, cutting. It's really nice. It has all the features that I like in other books that I've recommended. You know, it's well illustrated, it's clearly illustrated, it's written in a conversational style, which is how I like these things to be. So it's not too dry, it's not too wacky either. It just lays out all the information that you need without overdoing it. It's a really valuable book. It's by a long way the best book that I've come across for learning welding. If you're gonna, most of welding, like anything, I always say to people that welding, for instance, is like playing a guitar or playing any other instrument. The basics are very easy to pick up, but to get any good, you're just gonna have to put in the hours of practice. And it's just the same with welding as it is with guitaring or pianoing or whatever. And you don't need somebody there with you when you're practicing, but you do need something to refer to make sure that you're doing it right, and also to be able to look up the things that you're obviously not doing right and how to correct them. And this is really good for that. It's also a book that I refer back to even after decades of welding. I will occasionally go and get this book and for something to look up if I've forgotten it, or if it's something esoteric that I don't normally come across. It's an absolute cracker of a book there. The other book, this is a book published by Lindsay Publishing, and so it's a reprint of a very old out of copyright book. This is 1907 this was published. So this is Metalworking by Hasluck, and this has a lot in common with the DIY books that I liked. So not just the modern one, but the old ones going way back. So this goes all the way back, and this book covers every aspect of metalworking. From the off, it just launches into foundry work, because why wouldn't you? And then there's 40 pages of absolutely dense information about foundry work, which is still very relevant, including how to build your own burners and furnaces and so forth. Cracking stuff. Then we've got some of it doesn't hold up in the modern age so well, like servicing and polishing. There's an awful lot of hand filing in this book that I don't think anyone's going to be interested in these days. I certainly wouldn't be. But when it comes to working sheet metal, to forging, to just so much stuff in here it's quite phenomenal. I mean, I read this book and I'm just in awe of the guy that wrote it, just from knowing all this stuff, and let alone being able to put it down in a book and making it accessible to people to read, you know, 100 and so years later. So like I say, in common with the old DIY books, this book will tell you how to do things from scratch. So in here you've got foundry work, and then he talks about the castings and machining, but not just in an abstract way. It goes on to say So you'll need a lathe to go to the next step. Here's how to build a lathe from scratch. You know, cast the castings, and then once you've made your lathe, it goes on about steam engines. Here's how to build a steam engine. Steam engine is going to need a boiler. Here's how to make a boiler. There's even a chapter in here on the newfangled technology of the internal combustion engine, and of course it just tells you how to go about building it. There's plans in here for a petrol engine. This is a book that I like because it reminds me that no matter how good I get at what I do, and no matter how much that I can do, which is quite a lot now. I mean, it's been a while since I've started tinkering with things. There's so much more to know, and that's way back when, you know, in the Victorian Edwardian era, those kind of guys that knew stuff, they really knew stuff, and they'd look at the things that I know and they'd find it pitiable. And I think that's great. So if your ego ever gets out of control because you think you can make a few things, a book like this will bring you back down to earth. But also provide inspiration that there's more to learn, but it's not just more to learn, but it's within grasp. And that's something that's really valuable, I think. And that's something that's common throughout all the recommended books that I've recommended in this series, is that they will give you the tools to learn the things for yourself. I mean, no book can actually give you the skills, but a book can give you the tools to then develop the skills yourself. And that's something that isn't always apparent. And like I've said before, as a youngster, it wasn't apparent to me that it would be possible to do these things. Nobody said that to me. Nobody ever told me what I was capable of actually doing. And in the modern age, you're much more likely to be told what you can't do than what you can do. Particularly when it comes to practical things. And the more modern the thing that you're looking at, the less there is for you to do to it. And by that I mean, if you pop the bonnet on a modern car, for instance, what are you going to do in there? I don't know. Plug it into a laptop, because that's what they tend to do at garages now. Whereas pop the bonnet on my Land Rover, and the guy that wrote this back in 1907 would have had a reasonable understanding of what was under the bonnet of the Land Rover. It's not too far divorced from what he knew back then, and I think that's great. And conversely, we can learn things now that you can then build. You know, I built the home that I live in from scratch, and that's from knowledge that I gained from these books. So if you're into metalworking, not just blacksmithing, but metalworking in general, these two books come highly, highly recommended. And this one, because it's a reprint of a very old book, and it's way out of copyright, this is relatively cheap. It's worth looking at Lindsay Publications anyway, looking at their list of books. I've got some other books that came from, I think, the late 1800s or very early 1900s, which are like farm instructional manuals, and they're great as well, because I think particularly in America there was a real sense of, if you want something done, you're going to have to do it yourself, because there might not be anybody around that would be able to do that thing for you. I think, you know, tradesmen were probably quite sparse in a lot of America, probably still are. I mean, it's a big old place. So there was a sense of self-sufficiency in America that we probably never had in this country, just because it's such a much smaller place. So some of those old American farm books are really good reads, and they're very cheap books to buy, because, like I say, I presume all the books on the Lindsay Publications list, if not all of them, but then a large proportion of them are reprints of out of copyright books, so they can be had very cheaply. I mean, if you're a real skinflint, you can find them on the internet and you can just download it and read it, but it's nice to have a physical, properly printed copy, I think. So that's Metalworking by Paul Hasluck, which is the most comprehensive book on metalworking I've ever come across, from an old book or from a modern book. And Farm and Workshop Welding, which is a really clear, concise and complete manual on welding and fabrication. So those two are my pick of the week. Thanks for watching. Cheers.